Namaste. Welcome to Satsang today. Just before we get started, could I ask that nobody uses the chat function while we're actually in the session? It can be distracting for those. If you also have, if it does come up, there is a little icon next to the chat thing, little arrow that you can click on that says you can uncheck show chat previews. I'll put my teeth in. So if you don't want them popping up, you can also click that. But if I could ask, just moving forward, that during the actual satsang, not to be messaging backwards and forwards, because really we should be focused here and present to what's going on. Thank you. So welcome to Satsang, and glad that you're here. And if you are challenged with something or struggling with something, or if you've just broken through something, you're definitely in the right place. Satsang is a gathering. Literal meaning of it is to gather together in truth. And a Sangha community is a powerful thing. It really is. It helps us to overcome things that we wouldn't be able to so easily on our own. And I said it before, but it's always worth saying again that satsang and awakening is the highest human endeavor that we can be motivated on as a human being. But it's also can be the most challenging and sometimes can feel very isolated. So if you can engage and make friends with other members of the Sangha, it's highly, highly recommended. We all need each other for support and love and friendship. And it was really beneficial as well to make friends with like-minded people that are on the same pathway, the same journey that you are on. And of course, we're all on that journey, but some of us consciously at this point. So I have some questions I'm going to start to read. We've had a lot of questions sent in, and we have a gap before the next satsang. So I'll start with these. I'll try to get through 3 or 4 at least. And then I'll open it up for questions here on the session today. So this one says, hi Helen, your teachings have created some amazing openings in my life the past few years. Thank you for being you. I'd like some advice, please. The new me wants to stay in the present and trust that divine intelligence will kick in when needed. The old me still wants to control everything in life. I feel like I'm unprepared for future events. If I haven't gone over every possible worst case scenario in my mind and tried to come up with every possible solution. I'm a married mum of 4 children, all young adults now. So I can always find something or someone to worry about. I remember that, being a mum of 4 myself. I recognize the worry almost immediately as an old, useless behavior and know that worrying has never changed an outcome. Yet simply trying to push the worries away only leads to a feeling of jangled nerves. Do you have any suggestions on how to break this pattern of needing to feel prepared for any scenario? I would love to cultivate the trust that the future will be fine without me trying to run the show. Thanks in advance, and sending much love from Arizona. So the first thing I want to say is that if we are expecting our mind to become quiet, mind is going to try to think over every possible scenario, as you said, every outcome that could happen about something, and plenty that couldn't really happen in reality, but still it likes to work through the hypothetical things as well. And if we're expecting that to stop, then we're going to be disappointed. Really, the way around this is to cultivate that. You've said the new me, which by which I think you mean the real self, the eternal self. That new me and the old me, I would suggest just stepping back from both of those. And that might be a surprising thing to say. You said the new me wants to stay in the present and trust that divine intelligence will kick in. So there is already something that trusts. And there is already something that is always present now. So you could say that the old me has given itself a little upgrade. The old egoic structure is masquerading as this new me that really, really wants to stay present. I really, really want to stay in this moment, and I really want to be able to trust. And that's a noble aspiration for our egoic sense of self, but it's incapable of actually doing that. So practically, just recognizing this new me might also be a little bit of a manufactured, much better version, spiritually speaking, than the old me. But stepping back here with me now and asking, is there something else that already trusts? A kind of an open invitation to that part of us which is naturally in flow with the timing of manifestation and doesn't really try to grab or control, or doesn't have to go through this analysis of every single thing. So letting those bits of you be, they are how they are. Mind is going to do what it's going to do. And just kind of asking openly, is there something else already present which is unchanging, doesn't even have to learn to trust? I spent a lot of time feeling jealous on my awakening of people that could just trust. They seemed to just relax. They were relaxed about everything. They knew that the money they needed was going to come in, or the person that they wanted to meet was going to show up. They just knew with a certainty. And I tried very hard to make my mind trust, and it never actually managed to do it. But eventually I realized I don't need it to. There is some part of me that is already allowing and just going with the flow of life. And that is the true self, the awareness, the beingness, consciousness, whatever we want to call it. So instead of trying really hard to make this new me stay present all the time, then maybe there is something even kind of further back in your identity, something that's even before that, that just is, and isn't like trusting or untrusting. It's just already in the flow. I know what you mean by trust, so I get that. But is there something that is the flow, even rather having to get into it? And that's a much more kind of relaxed, open way to go through life. Because we're not trying to make our mind different. We're not trying to make it silent. We're just focusing more on this part of us that's already quiet. And as we do that, the mind's kind of running through scenarios. It just begins to become quieter. For me, my mind first felt like it was right here and really loud, like talking right at me. As I focus more on what I already am and not becoming, not moving towards something, it seemed like somebody just turned the volume down on this analyzer, this commentator, this constant stream of yes, but, and what if, and should and shouldn't that goes on. And eventually it was so quiet that I don't know when it really stopped. And I don't really have a definitive time where I can say that stopped happening, because it didn't matter. There was just so much peace, love, and joy at that point, deep silence. The trust kind of automatically happened with that. I never really learned to trust life and the universe and the flow of life. It was just an automatic thing that happened the more I identified as the self with a capital S. So I would suggest not trying so hard and just gently inviting, what is it within me that's already these things I want to achieve? And what is it within me that's already completely loving my mind and doesn't want to or need to do anything with that? So I hope that is helpful there. Next one. Dear Helen, I would love to hear your thoughts on why we humans keep giving over our power to tyrants like Hitler or Putin. It seems to be a pattern that has repeated over and over throughout history, with increasingly disastrous consequences for life on Earth. What causes this pattern, and how can we best contribute to its transformation or dissolution? With much love and gratitude. Well, you probably guess what I'm going to say, that what we can do best to stop that is to move towards our own awakening, to transform this. As we awaken, each one of us, we are spreading the belief throughout human consciousness that it is possible and it is happening for ordinary people to wake up and live a life based on truth and mutual respect and love. And as to why we tend to, as a species, follow fellow human beings that have less than loving motivations, let's just say, it really comes from the level of consciousness that most of us are operating on. So I believe I'm a separate being, and we all do, of course, until we don't. I might not be thinking that consciously, but my whole life is lived from that perspective, and it seems very, very true. And as a separate being, I'm going to feel really unsafe, whether I'm conscious of that or not. And I'm going to try to find a group that I can belong to for safety, just as animals form herds and groups and travel together, whether it's a family group or human beings do the same thing. They naturally gravitate towards what they think is going to give them the most safety and the most power and the most benefit towards survival. It's a survival instinct. I'm safer when I'm with a group of beings. And in fact, some of the worst punishments that we inflict on each other is ostracizing someone from a group. So as a seeming separate being, I'm always looking to gravitate towards safety. And the human mind cannot discern between real, true spiritual power and egoic manipulation, control, and all of that. The mind can be entranced by charisma and a powerful personality and take that as a truth and something that they might want to move towards. And the larger a group like that grows, then the more kind of pulling power it has, but it can only draw you in if you're vibrating on a similar rate. The one doing the controlling and all of that is also feeling scared and wanted to feel more safe and powerful, just as the people joining that. So the way out of that is to realize that we're already safe by beginning to see what we really are. What we really are is formless, cannot die, has never been born, doesn't need anything. Of course, our bodies need things, and then we'll begin to rise in frequency, at least in the body and mind, to a point where we can't be fooled by someone like that, someone who doesn't have the best interests of all humanity and the planet at their core as their motivation. And as you awaken more and you're beginning to live from this place more and more, you'll be able to begin to feel when you meet someone. It might not be a conscious thought, but you will be able to feel whether this person is telling the truth when they speak about what's important to them. You'll be able to recognize this person does not have my best interests at heart, or this person does. And your body's always giving you this feedback anyway, in real time, even when we think we're separate beings, but we tend to override it. We tend to ignore it and go towards what's popular, what's big. And the best way out of that, as I said before, is to move towards your own awakening and set an example. If 100,000 beings woke up to the truth and began to spread a message that it's possible for ordinary human beings with families and jobs and careers and all of that, then that would begin to become a massive vibrational pull. People would start to believe that it's possible for them. And we're seeing that happen on the planet. But insulating yourself, ensuring yourself against being taken in by those lower vibrations, by shifting your own identity, searching for what you are, and releasing ideas that are not true for you now, like I'm not safe. Can't get much safer than being the eternal self, the deathless, formless. Hi, Helen. I wanted to ask about a state that I think many people get to that keeps us trapped from progressing. I am fully aware that my thoughts and reelings arise under their own volition. I think maybe that was feelings and it auto-corrected. I can see I am the witness to them arising, that I have no choice on what arises. Yet the reaction to these thoughts and feelings can still be very strong and create suffering and a feeling of being attacked. Why me? It asks. I try to acknowledge that the reaction itself is just another thought or feeling, but it feels closer, more real, persistent, and inescapable. It doesn't appear enough to know that things arise independently. Moreover, sometimes the thoughts feel vindictive, like they're trying to cause anxiety. How do you get past this stalemate? So for me, the way past this was I began to see I was watching these thoughts and feelings arise, and I was watching this internal response to what was going on. Everything that happened in my life, there was an internal trying to grab it, or an internal trying to push it away, which I realized is really what my egoic sense of self was. If something was useful and helpful and relevant, there'd be this trying to hold on to it. And if it was considered dangerous or unuseful, it was pushed away. And this was going on with people and also emotions going on inside and things like that. And for me also, it wasn't enough to just say, well, they're just arising. It gave me a little tiny bit of peace for a little while. These things are just coming and going. Just watch them, they'll come and go. And I did that. But I was still disturbed with these reactions that were going on inside. And you're right, it's a very common place to kind of hang out spiritually in awakening, but eventually even that becomes uncomfortable. So the way to release anything is through love, loving acceptance. And when I first tried to do that with these egoic reactions, it seemed like, how on earth can I come to love something that's constantly attacking and judging me, and inside my own self, attacking and judging, diminishing, and is also constantly doing it with other beings, constantly judging what's going on outside and inside. It seemed impossible to come to a place of loving acceptance of that. But really, loving acceptance for me actually took the form of understanding. Why is this voice vindictive? Why is this voice judging? Why is it judging others? Why is it judging me? And perhaps even more importantly, why am I pushing it away? When I really looked at this, why am I pushing away my egoic response to things, or my mind's way of seeing things? And as I began to try to understand that, something beautiful really began to happen. I found that in trying to understand why it's talking this way, why it's doing this thing, why are these reactions happening, it was automatically a form of love. Wanting to understand was an opening. And it was a third response. It was different to this push and pull, trying to push away, trying to grab a hold. For the first time ever, there was this third response where I was like, why is this actually happening in that moment? Why is this happening? Why is this reaction happening? And why am I trying to, some negative emotion comes up, why am I trying to push it away? Some bliss happens, some deep peace in meditation. Why am I trying to keep a hold of that? And I realized just by questioning why, it took me out of identifying as the push and the pull and all of that. And I began to really, for the first time, understand why our minds work the way they do. And anyone, it's not anything special that I've done. Why is my mind constantly judging? And I began to see that it's talking about how it thinks I am right now, based on where it thinks I should be right now, or how this other person is compared to where it thinks I should be, or how this emotion is and whether this emotion should still be here according to mind. It's comparing and judging always to try to get me to a place where it thinks I need to be. And of course, that place was awakening at the time. As I looked further into this, the resistance began to dissolve, and then the mind began to dissolve. It wasn't as loud as I was just saying. And it got very much just eventually like a whisper. And then someone, the corner of the room, just quietly talking so I could hardly hear. Instead of someone shouting in my face, it was just this tiny little voice, because I'd actually run towards it and fallen in love with it. Never liked it, but fell in love with it by understanding it. And there's an enormous spiritual benefit in doing that, a spiritual power that comes to help then, or our own true self, our own power can come through in that moment of loving, understanding, acceptance. My mind is trying to get me to my goal. And it's trying to get me to my goal based on where it thinks I am. And it thinks I am a seeker moving towards awakening. And when I come to see that that can never succeed, because I'm not really a seeker and I'm not moving towards anything, I am already that, as we all are, then there was a softening of my own response to my internal conflict, whether it was conflict about what's going on in here or something out there. And I realized that's what love actually is, at least the way I'd explain it in this context. So when one of those responses arises next time, whatever's triggered it is whatever's triggered it. But if you can, just in that moment, and I wrote it down on a piece of paper, I like me little notes I carried around. Why is this happening? Why is this response coming up? And it's not mine's, why is this still happening? Why haven't I transcended this yet? It was, why is this occurring actually? What is this about? And can I understand it more? And I found out that the only reason my mind was still talking is because I wouldn't accept it yet. Because I thought that accepting was liking and agreeing to and all of that. So I hope that is helpful. You'll be amazed what happens when you fall back in love with your mind. It'll be gone and you won't be able to find it anywhere. Okay, we'll do a couple more. Hi, Helen. Hi, I've read the book, Dissolving the Ego. When you were meditating before your breakthrough, how much meditation were you doing? How many sittings per day and how long per sitting? That's so I started meditating before my breakthrough, and I thought that if I just do more meditation, I'd get there twice as fast if I double my sitting time. And I got to a point where I could sit for about 6 hours in meditation. Couldn't feel my legs or my hips or anything when I finished meditating. But I could sit in a deep state for a very long time, and I could experience a lot of bliss. But after about 3 years of this, I realized nothing was changing in my life. In fact, everything was getting worse in my life. My whole outer life fell apart spectacularly, pretty much every which way it could. And I began to realize that that wasn't the answer. It felt nice while I was meditating, but this is when I began to really embrace directly looking at truth, which are all the methods in the Dissolving the Ego book. So right before the breakthrough, probably 20 minutes a day, half an hour sometimes in the morning, formal meditation, sitting in this room here, just sitting with my eyes closed, listening to silence or being aware of awareness, and hundreds of times been distracted back to looking at thoughts and listening to emotions rather than silence, just bringing my attention back again and again and again. And to a certain extent, putting aside, not looking to feel a certain way in meditation. For a long time, that bliss went, and I was just, well, this is just silence. It's kind of, I'm listening to the silence. And then there was suddenly an interest developed in meditating the rest of my day. So I started to kind of listen to the silence when I'm driving. Can I do it in the supermarket? Can I do it when I'm in school for parent-teacher meetings? You know, or any way I could. So it went from 20 minutes sitting to pretty much all day, but it wasn't a chore. It's like, can I do this with my eyes open? Because I wanted that calmness. I wanted the peace I was finding in meditation to come into the rest of my day. In fact, I needed it to, had to have that refuge. So I could say 20 minutes formal meditation, or I could say all day informal meditation. I don't mean a whole waking state, but every time I could, every time I had 30 seconds, can I notice the awareness? So when the actual breakthrough happened, I couldn't tell you. I just, one day, a lot of fear arose. I can't remember why. And there was just nothing that resisted it inside, nothing at all. And it was really unusual. There was no knee-jerk response. There was a kind of opening up and just letting this fear be flooding the body. And I didn't realize that that could happen. And I didn't realize I'd forgotten how to resist something, which was very strange, but lovely. And that just never came back again, that resisting. So more important, why you're meditating. Are you meditating to get rid of something? The ego, which is an endless task. You never get there. Or are you meditating to see clearer, be with the truth that you already are? And if that's the motivation, then 20 minutes a day is adequate. There's some days I couldn't even do 20 minutes in one sitting with 4 kids and a business, 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes in the evening. But where your heart is most important. What's most important to you in that? Okay, so we'll go one more. Can the unraveling of ego show up as a seeming crisis, such as car being stolen, break-ins to the garage, etc.? Or is it about viewing these events from a different perspective? As in, no matter what the circumstances, awareness, can't really be affected by this. Is it all just a play of consciousness, even the seeming bad stuff? Thank you, Helen. I just love your videos and how they make me feel. Thank you, thank you. So yeah, it is about viewing these events from a different perspective, but it's also about these events. So something bad happens in our life. We could say mind would label it bad, negative, unwanted. And then things that happen, mind would some of those label good, wanted, and positive. So resting as the awareness, those labels aren't quite so important. But of course, as a human being also, you're also awareness showing up as a human being. You want a better life experience, as we all do. It'd be nice to not have a train wreck of a life going on, as mine was. So viewing these events from a different place, a different perspective, yes. But also looking at these events when they happen, because our outer world is a mirror image of our inner world, a reflection. And I'm not talking about law of attraction. If I feel this way inside, I'll attract this thing outside. I'm talking about I am everywhere at all times. None of us are really just in one place. You are everywhere at all times. So what you're seeing going on in your external life, your relationships, your finances, everything is a mirror image of what we're not wanting or you're not yet able to see inside. So when the car gets stolen, or you run out of petrol, or you don't have enough money, or whatever's going on, what seems to come up inside? What emotion comes up? And what is that emotion trying to tell you? So every pattern in our life, every karmic pattern is showing up 3 ways: as a thought that we haven't yet recognized, as an emotion, and then an event in my external life. So the car gets stolen. I feel a lot of fear. I don't feel safe. And as I begin to question what the fear is, that the external event is a reflection of the idea that I'm not safe. As I begin to question that, is that still true for me as the self, as the noumenon, as the pure awareness? Then my external situation begins to change. And so it's not that I'm scared of this thing that happened out there, which is how mind says. I'm scared of not having enough money or not being able to heal my body. I'm scared of being broken into at nighttime. I'm scared of spiders, or whatever it is that we mind tells us we're scared of. It's that this of is a reflection, a mirror image. As we question the belief inside, it begins to reflect differently in our outer world. So all of those, seeing it from a different place, but also looking at what it's trying to, what this event is a mirror image of, that we haven't perhaps embraced and questioned. And staying with this question, is this really true? Is it true I'm not good enough? Is it true I'm not safe? Until this event begins to turn 180 to a completely different experience and the emotion has diminished and disappeared, that's when we've really transcended this idea. So it is the bad stuff too, but that bad stuff isn't exactly just something we have to put up with and that we're powerless against. We can learn from every single thing, and I used every single thing to help me in my question and my contemplation. I was determined when something like that happened never to go through it again, best I could, and used it to fuel my contemplation, my self-inquiry. Okay, so if anybody would like to ask or question or share something, feel free to raise your hand. I have more questions, but there we go. Saima, yep, when you're ready.
Hello, Helen.
Hi.
I'm very happy to be back.
Wonderful.
I had a hiatus for like a month or maybe, yeah, where I couldn't come close to any spiritual teaching, and it was really surprising to me because I knew how lovely I felt when I listened to even recorded satsangs, and then all of a sudden I couldn't. And then the first satsang I came back to was talking just about that. It was almost like a welcome back home kind of thing. And I was like, oh yeah, it makes sense. And also now the topics that I find that you've been talking about lately are exactly what I'm going through. For example, knowing that what's happening outside is not a causal and what's effect? I forgot. Like the way we understand it, it's a continuum, and it's the kind of thing that used to trigger me and be like, I didn't cause this, I didn't deserve this. But now it feels easy, and it gives me hope that it's like, oh, this is good news. This is not. It's not very it's not very far. I can change it, but I don't know how yet, and that's okay. And so I was wondering if I could ask specifically on certain events, like lately I've been going to social gatherings around me because I'm in a new place and I want to meet people, but there's this character that keeps appearing every time, and it's literally my father incarnate, like my experience of my father. It's always an older man, and they make me feel the same emotion, the fear, and it's different places, but the same person keeps coming up.
It's like different bodies keep showing up. It's the same thing going on, right?
Yes. And so the last time it happened, I was just like, okay, I can't even be mad anymore. Like the first time it happened, I came back and I just I told someone like a long history about long story of what happened, and but then now it's like, okay, what can we learn here? What do I do in the moment? I just go straight back to that little girl character of, and then when I'm out of it, that's when I notice it. But then I'm like, okay, what's the next practical baby step that is relevant for me in this particular situation?
I think that the first thing is to, if you can, accept that this feeling, this person, whoever that particular body is that shows up in your life, that happens, and then this internal thing happens of, I think you mentioned fear, and you become this, you suddenly regress a lot of years seemingly, and back in this fear place. So first of all is accepting that's okay. It's not pleasant, but it doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. So we're going to have these events that seem to cause us to feel a certain way, as we were saying. As I can lovingly watch this reaction inside more, then I can begin to question it. I'm never going to like it. I'm never going to go, yay, I feel terrified, and there was someone in my life that seemed to make me feel that way. I would just be shaking and terrified every time I saw them. And the first part was just being kinder to myself. Like, can I just accept that there's this huge response going on in my body, and give it a little bit more space if I can right now to exist? And then as I did that, again, not liking it at all or even wanting it, but it is here, my body's feeling it, can I acknowledge it a little bit more? And then I can ask, what's it trying to tell me? So in that moment, when this fear response comes up, you can, if you can't do it in that moment, it's totally okay. You can sit later, an hour later, when you've had a cup of tea, got away from the situation, calm down a bit. If you can do it in that moment, that's great too. But just asking, you're not losing anything spiritually if you can't do it till you're at this gathering, you meet this person, all this stuff happens. It might be that you can't even remember to look at this while you're there, and that's okay. Later you're home, and what was that about actually? What was that reaction really saying to me? When I looked at this inside myself, fear, terror, panic, anxiety, all of it, whatever name we give is fear really, isn't it? Just varying intensities. There was a real deep voice inside, not deep as in bass pitch, but hidden away deep, like squashed in the depths, that was just absolutely certain, I am not safe. I'm not safe. And when I could invite this and question, what actually is this trying to tell me, this reaction? There was always this I statement, I'm not good enough, I'm not safe, I'm not going to get what I want or need to feel safe, something like that. And then I could begin to question, well, that feels very true as a separate being. If I'm here alone and there's another being over there that seems to be very intimidating and threatening even, and then it's very true that I'm not safe. But if I am that other being too, if I'm not really separate to anyone or anything, is it really true I'm not safe? Is that still valid? And of course, our body is telling us, yes, that's really true. But as we begin to question, then it can begin to release this once and for all. So this trigger is just showing us a thought, an idea that's so deeply believed, we're not even conscious of it anymore. And it's asking us to look at that idea and then question it. So next time, if you can, or even you can do it right now, it doesn't have to be even when it's triggered, when it's keyed in. Sometimes it's too strong then, right? You get a sense sometimes it's overwhelming, the fear.
And it's still saying on fear. When I listen to you break down somebody else's question, I get it. But then using that information to look at myself, it's still kind of difficult. So hope I can ask another more specific question.
Yeah.
And that is dream related. I have the same phenomenon in dreams where I wake up, I'm sure I'm awake, I can see my husband next to me, but then the environment around me is doing its own thing. And of course, because it feels like my latent like emotion is fear. So the scenario is like a scary situation. And sometimes I'm even aware, like, okay, this is your fear showing up. This is the fear showing up.
Yeah.
But I don't know what to do about it. I'm terrified. And the thing feels really real and it's standing right in front of me. And I'm like, I'm going through many thoughts like, what would Ellen say? What would this teacher say? But it's not working. And so now I have to jerk myself awake. Yeah.
So setting aside why it's happened. So don't blocking everything else out except the actual fear, the feeling. So not even what's going on in the dream, not the person in the social gathering, just if you can put yourself back in that fear right now as best you can, just feeling it the best you can. It might not be activated right now, but just as much as you can get in touch with it, the memory of it. What would that fear say if it had a voice, if it had a mouth? What would it say to you? If it needed to tell you something, what would it say?
I think you would say, like, I'm not worthy. At least, I don't know. I feel like it kind of makes me feel small and
powerless.
And powerless, yes.
So can you see, because there isn't a causal relationship, I'm not scared of this thing, the answer is, or this person, the answer is to focus on the emotion itself, which is what often takes us the time, because we keep believing for a while, I'm scared of this person, but really I'm just scared. And when I looked at fear, I said it came up with this, I'm not safe. But when I asked myself why I'm not safe, I came back to I'm not good enough. There's something wrong with me. And then that looped back around to I'm not safe because I can't quite seem to be good enough to where I will feel safe. And it was just kind of going around. So these two beliefs, I'm not safe and I'm not good enough, or there's something wrong with me, something, some variation on that. We're so interlocked because my mind said, when I am the person I need to be, which was this awakened being I wanted to be, then and only then will I be safe. But I could never arrive there because I was starting from the premise that I was unsafe and that I was not good enough. So questioning these statements, you've said a couple of things there. I'm not good enough, and powerless was the other one that you said. I would spend some time with those. Is it really true I'm powerless? Is it really true I'm not good enough? And you can use the contemplation video on the core teachings playlist on the YouTube channel if you haven't already seen it. But just questioning these things that we take for granted in those moments. It seems true, doesn't it, that you're powerless in that situation, trapped in the dream, trapped by the other being, even trapped by the fear. There's nothing I can do about it, powerless to change. And that's true when we're a separate individual human being, or when we think we are. But when we are the infinite self, can you be powerless? This that creates the whole cosmos. So I think this powerless thing is at the root of it. Can you feel it?
And a scenario comes to mind just recently, going to the laundromat, and there's a giant guy just, I don't know, toying with me, coughing next to me, and I'm just feeling really powerless. And I know this is just the same scenario.
Yeah.
I take it with me everywhere, at the supermarket, and
So this is where I'd put my focus if I were you. Can I be powerless? Am I actually? Because it's part and parcel of thinking I'm a separate being, isn't it? There's all these other beings that can have power and influence over me if I'm a separate being. And I'll feel powerless and small is the other word you used as well. So investigating that feeling in particular, and it will begin to unravel there.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
I'm sure it's helpful for everyone, because we've all had something like that going on, you know, some authority figure, some government body, some rule, some other person that's made us feel powerless, or has reflected our feeling of powerlessness, we should say. And it's kind of ongoing in life, isn't it?
One of the biggest thing is now there's the sense of like I'm failing when that happens, but now I feel like I'm free from that a little bit. Like,
yeah,
this is as it's supposed to be.
Yeah, the fact that this is coming up is because you can look at it now as a separate being. If I feel I'm a separate being and I feel powerless, there's nothing I can do about that. No wonder we bury it down. So because your awakening is deepening, because you're starting to see that you're not really a separate being at all, this is why this is coming up now. So it's actually a sign of progress, the deepening of awakening. But our mind sees it the other way, doesn't it? Like, oh, why is this still happening? Why can't I get rid of this? And yeah, wonderful. Thank you for sharing. I hope it's helpful.
Thank you.
Lovely. Okay. Would anyone else like to ask a question or share something? We have some time. I have some other questions here I can read if nobody has anything. Okay, so let me see. I already read that one. Okay. So I'll read this one and I'll come to you, Rose, in a minute. This one says, oops. Dear Helen, there we go. What I have to share comes with a great deal of fear of judgment, rejection, and of being made bad and wrong, not only for sharing, but for the decision I made that feels right for me. The decision to not vaccinate. Triggers are very intense at times, as living in Canada with a prime minister who clearly voices his disdain for the unvaccinated has had a huge impact on its citizens, particularly those choosing no. I was hopeful in having these triggers dissolve as I continue this work. And yes, your teachings have been very helpful in providing a solid foundation when feeling wobbly. I'm going to get real with what is consistently showing up in my space. I have not experienced such censoring and silencing of professionals such as doctors and nurses who question the COVID narrative or voice their concerns. I am a retired nurse who attended many peaceful rallies, initially out of curiosity and feeling guided, and also having had my own concerns and questions about the narrative. I listened to doctors, nurses, concerned parents, and other professionals authentically share. What I witnessed was both disturbing and empowering, and at times feeling challenged being with the disturbing. I was not aware of how corrupt our government and media actually are. It's like witnessing corruption on steroids. Recently, a deeper despair showed up so intensely I got scared. My husband beautifully held the space for its expression as it voiced the evils in the world and its impact on so many people, particularly with this recent narrative. I felt relief and a tiredness following. I continue to experience concern at times for all that is being revealed to those of us who are open to the information outside of the mainstream media. What is transpiring globally is troubling. I am fearful of this conversation not being appropriate to share in this community, and there is a strong urge to censor its expression and not send it in at all. Wow, my heart is pounding at the thought of clicking submit. Just having expressed it to you, Helen, is helpful. Any feedback from you is welcomed. I can't thank you enough for all your amazing teachings. I am more loving and accepting of myself, and fear is not as scary anymore, if that makes sense. Very grateful. So it does make sense, and thank you for your bravery and sharing. And one of the things that surprised me most about karmic patterns going on for me, where fear was coming up and things like that, was that it quite often wasn't In fact, every time it wasn't about the thing that it was presenting itself to be. So I thought there was a fear of this thing and that thing, and I thought that I wasn't good enough because this thing was going on. And here you're saying there is fear because of this situation you find yourself in. And again, I'd like to flip that on its head, that this situation you find yourself in is a reflection, a mirror image of the fear inside, the idea that you're not safe as a separate being, that there are other beings out there. Can you see that in what you've written? The idea of other beings that are able to control us and exert influence and power over us. And I know we've all experienced that. I have myself when I thought I was a separate being. But as the formless self, there isn't anyone or anything other than me. And I had to really question this when it showed up in certain areas like this for me. And just as I was saying before, so you'll probably find that this is not even really about this external situation, although it's showing up as this way in your life. And most important, interesting out of everything that you've written is the fear of actually sending this in, a fear of being, can you see some sense of relief after sending it? It's gone, there's nothing I can do about it now. I've sent it. And then some fear of being exposed or saying something wrong, something like that. You said, I'm not even sure if this is appropriate to share in this community. So there's a fear of being judged and all of that, as you said at the beginning. So looking at that, that's the bit that really interests me, because that's the bit where we can really begin to make a change and then have it externally reflect as something different than what you're experiencing. So fear of being judged, fear of sharing something that's not appropriate, fear of sharing and submitting and saying something that's personal to you, holds a lot of beings back from sending questions in for quite some time. And it's all coming from this idea that you're not who you need to be, that you're not what you need to be, that you're not, that there's something, the idea that there's something wrong with you, or that you're unworthy in some way, that you're flawed somehow. Because if you had a real deep sense of adequacy, yes, there's things I'd like to improve about my mind and body in my life, but I am already okay. I am enough. I was never flawed as the self. Then these fears wouldn't show up in that way. And even if people did give you external criticism, then it would be, okay, that's your opinion. That's you're entitled to your opinion as much as I am mine. It wouldn't have this kind of gut level fear behind it. So I know this seems like a big thing going on in your life right now, and it is, but I'd like to suggest that it's not actually about that. That's a mirror image of your own fear of being yourself, based on the idea somewhere deep down inside our egoic sense of self that being yourself isn't a good idea, opening up isn't a good idea because I'm not good enough. So the way out of this for me, I had to face it full on being a spiritual teacher, because pretty much everything is exposed. So I had to really look at this. Is it true? I'm not, there's something wrong with me. Can I move beyond that? Was I ever flawed? And with this comes a deep adequacy, a completeness, a wholeness, and perhaps the most, what's the word? The most amazing thing that awakening has done for me is to allow me to actually like myself, to fall back in love with myself, my mind and body as they are right now, before, and even before all these things that I wanted to get rid of about myself had gone. This is how I am right now. I am totally adequate. I am the divine self showing up as a human being, as we all are. And there was never anything wrong with me. This idea that I somehow split off as a separate being from the rest of eternity fostered this idea that somehow something broke in that there was an imperfection. But all of that is utter nonsense. As I recognize my own divinity, I began to like myself more as well, which was huge. My own opinion of me was more important than anyone else's for the first time in my life. And I could share and say and do what I needed to, that was right for me. And it also just happened to be what's right for everyone else as well. It's funny how it works like that. So I haven't experienced this kind of thing myself, but I've experienced a very similar situation where I felt powerless, as we were just saying, to change it. So I would look at those fears, and those fears are based on the idea that you're not good enough. And that would be where I'd put my attention, questioning. Why isn't your opinion, your sharing here, as valid as mine or anyone else's? And where is it and who is it that thinks that? It's only a voice in your head that says that. Everyone else is rooting for you, encouraging you, just as I am. So just looking at that, why the self-criticism? And it's not on a conscious level, but we're feeling it because we're scared to open up. We're scared to share. Why is that? It's a fear that we're going to say or do something wrong, isn't it? And then I'll be exposed and people will find out that I'm not really who they think I am and I'm not the right person or whatever. So all of that external stuff will begin to unravel and change as you question this, I promise you. Because you cannot do anything about that directly, can you? But you can recognize that inside and outside are one, cause and effect are one, the same thing. And as I move beyond the ideas that have held me back, it will reflect in and as my external life too. Wonderful. And we'll go to Rose for the last question.
Good morning, Helen.
Hi.
Your beautiful answering of the last question answered a lot, I think, of what I want to bring up. And I can feel the physicality of my body, you know, the fear, the anxiety of speaking. It took me a long time to press the button.
And then to keep it upright, not to take it down again.
Yeah. I haven't done that before.
Well done to you. Well done to you. I totally get that sitting in this chair, believe me.
Thank you. Thank you. So yeah, there's lots there that is really relevant. I wanted to come with my unthought out question this morning, which was what was coming up. I've been moving a lot. I've moved back to England after 2 years. 2.5 years. Last time I was here was with my daughter who died 2 years ago. And I also had a big home. I had a kind of a stable base for everybody. So, and I had my daughter who was like my earth. She was my little grounded super being. And now I've moved to my other daughter's flat for 4 days. And this morning, just as an example, this morning, very unusual emotions in a way for me. There was anger, there was resentment, there was bitterness. So I sat with them, thinking of your words, thinking of Adishanti, to say, well, what would the anger say? And very soon, almost as always, when it's just sadness, I either go into my heart with love and a loving response and tears come, or I very quickly strip down from whatever might seem to be kind of jarry, stabby little anger, resentments to this sorrow. Yeah. This sorrow.
Deep, profound sadness, isn't it, inside? Yeah. Because really, anger and sadness are the same thing in that anger is saying, I can't get what I want and need. I'm blocked. It's not fair. Something or someone is blocking me. And sadness is saying the same thing, but from a much more sort of apathetic, there's not even any point in trying to, isn't it? There's just this deep sadness of years and years and years of not getting what I want or need, to feel safe, to feel loved, to feel important, to feel valued, whatever it is that we're searching for as human beings. Even awakening itself, there's just no point because I'm never gonna, the voice of that sadness would probably be saying the same thing as the anger, wouldn't it? But not with a different tone, you know. So it's the same kind of idea underneath all of that. When I discovered that they went through this anger, it unrolled itself as fear. And then when I went through the fear, there's just this deep despair, apathy, sadness. None of those words are completely, you know, right, but it was something like that, a real hopelessness underneath. And it actually felt quite relieving to finally get to expose that, to see that's really what's underneath all of this feeling of, I've been trying for so long and there's just, I can't do it again, you know, something like that. Yeah. And it was, you know, doing really well to share here, I must say. Take your time if you need to. This feeling for me was, I hated it when I saw it, you know, but then just beginning to understand that I've probably spent many, many lifetimes thinking I was a separate being. Bodies have come and gone. And throughout all of those, I've tried so hard to feel safe, to feel loved, to feel accepted, by trying to control my external circumstances. And then as I got more and more spiritual, trying to control my internal circumstances, failing every single time, as we all do. That the inside, there was just something that was just no, it wasn't a conscious thing, but it was just, I've given up. There's no, it wasn't even a conscious surrender. It was just, I've run out of energy to try to keep doing that. And I had to really look at that and feel that, but also then question that the reason I've failed all those times to feel safe, to feel loved, to feel appreciated, that life kept showing me I wasn't loved and wasn't safe, is because I was operating from this false idea that I'm a separate being. And no wonder then I had to fail. If I never was unsafe, then trying to feel safe is impossible, isn't it? Trying to feel worthy when I was always the source of love, I'm bound to fail. And I had to really recontextualize this whole kind of, however long it's been going on in this particular body, and then who knows how long in earthly years in different bodies. So it's actually an achievement that you've got to the bottom of this. You're actually, your egoic sense of self is feeling safe enough to go, here's what the real issue is. It doesn't feel good, does it? It's like, no, oh, thanks, that's great, thank you.
No.
It's a gift, but can I give it back again, you know, return?
Yeah. No, not at all, because another side of me is so quick to joy and so grateful for my friendships and my surroundings and so many sides of my life.
And just looking at that again, our ego doesn't have a perspective based in reality. It has a perspective that's skewed for no fault of its own, because it really feels isolated and separate. So part of that joy then and deepening peace that we're feeling as we begin to wake up, it begins to emerge as love, and not just peace and joy. And that love wants to embrace everything that is that's being rejected within us. And this is what's happening right now, isn't it? I love this enough to let it consciously come to the surface, even though it feels terrible, you know, and it really feels very unspiritual and unawakened when it arises. But isn't this the essence of authenticity? That I can look at this as the self without judgment of it, knowing it's not true, but also allowing my body to feel whatever it needs to feel as it comes up. And it's a sign of my progress then, that I can actually let this stuff finally come to the surface. I've spent so much pushing this down because I had no other way to deal with it. And it's never pleasant, but there was a relief for me in finally sort of getting to the bottom of what this was. And an opening, a quietness that came, and an upsurging peace, because all the energy I've been using to not look at this was finally freed up, you know, as it came up. And I think for me, there was a good couple of weeks where every now and again I just felt sometimes profoundly sad. Sometimes it was just there in the background for a day or so, and sometimes more in the foreground. But it just had to be felt. It just needed to be acknowledged. And then to understand why some part of us really feels that way, even though it seems in so much contrast to the peace that we're beginning to experience in meditation awakening. It takes a certain amount of presence and stability in our awakening to be able to allow this to come to the surface. Otherwise, it's just in our body, and it's a low vibration, and it makes us feel terrible.
Thank you.
It's very cathartic. It feels terrible, but it's very freeing to just actually finally feel it.
Yeah.
Acknowledge it.
Yeah, I'm trying to be, the focus at the moment is trying to be in my body, because again, I can switch into a meditation and like I'm off, and there's all sorts.
And that's okay, isn't it? You know, and as you're dealing with this stuff that's like the very core of our egoic sense of self, you're going to be having seemingly very different experiences. You know, so for me, deep, profound silence and peace and joy, and sometimes the strongest bliss. And then this sadness, this fear, unworthiness will come up. But it wasn't like before awakening where I was trying to avoid that stuff. It was coming up because I was able to be with it. And I didn't lose the peace then, or even the joy. So there was a kind of a weird joy of actually being able to acknowledge this stuff finally, and a gratitude for how healing it was for my body to just release this stuff, not to have to carry it around. Of course, you're going to want to escape that. Some part of you is going to want to escape. I'll just go into meditation and not deal with it, you know, and that's okay, isn't it? You're never going to want to feel this way.
Sometimes there's almost like there's a sort of a humor that comes in too, because I look at myself in whatever state I'm in and go, surely, you know, hang on, that's really not true, and you can choose something else, and you know, I can consciously choose.
I'm in the supermarket and everybody's lovely and they've all got this glow about them and everything's perfect, and then I go home and have a cup of tea and you know, it's like, what is going on? But it's just this stuff arising up because it's finally, as the self, you can't suppress it anymore, you know, and you don't want to, and of course your ego does, and he's like, no, don't go there. So it was very up and down phase for me, but it was the levels, you know, here was my highest place in my body and mind, here was my lowest, and they were finally coming together as I felt this stuff and released it, so that you don't have these sort of real dips afterwards. Yeah, you can feel there's something natural in what's happening, can't you? Something, this is how it's supposed to be. It's not pleasant, but there's some part of it that's how it's supposed to be. It's still small voice inside us that's terrified, feels absolutely unlovable, unworthy, and terrified. And at some point we have to kind of get in touch with that again and just give it a hug and allow it to say what it needs to say. Thank you for sharing that. Very brave. Thank you. Okay, so that feels like a perfect place to leave it today. Thank you all for your very brave sharing. And this is a perfect example of the value of satsang and a sangha, a community too. And it's exactly where we can look at this stuff together, stuff that we've been carrying for who knows how long, and finally be free of it. So thank you. Namaste.